My wife came back from her trip with the same suitcase, the same coat, the same cracked phone case she'd been meaning to replace for a year, and somehow she still felt like the wrong person standing in our doorway. She kissed me on the mouth, like she was aiming from memory instead of instinct, smiled too softly, and said, "Hey, you," like she'd been gone a month instead of 4 days. I noticed it right then. I just didn't respect what I noticed. Her name was Mara. We'd been married 6 years, together for 9, and by that point I thought I knew the difference between ordinary mood and actual shift. She was the kind of person who always arrived home carrying the energy of wherever she'd just been. If work was bad, the bad day walked in with her. If brunch with friends was fun, she'd still be laughing halfway through taking off her shoes. She brought life home loudly. That night, after her trip, she came in quiet, not sad, not tired. Quiet in a way that felt finished. The trip was for a college friend's wedding in Santa Fe. 4 days. I stayed home, fed the dog, sent the occasional dumb selfie from the couch. She sent pictures of string lights over a courtyard, her drink with a salted rim, her dress laid out on the hotel bed. Normal stuff. On the second night, she called me from outside the reception because the music was too loud. I remember leaning against the kitchen counter, listening to her laugh at something off to the side and asking, "You having fun?" "Yeah," she said, and then there was this tiny pause. More than I expected. At the time, that meant nothing. The first strange thing after she got back was that she unpacked immediately. Mara never unpacked immediately. She was a leave-the-suitcase half-open for 2 days person. She'd live out of it until guilt or inconvenience forced a decision. But that night she went straight to the bedroom, laid everything out in neat piles, started a load of laundry at almost midnight, and threw away her boarding pass before I'd even asked how the flight was. I stood in the doorway watching her fold a black dress over a hanger. "You don't have to do that tonight," I said. She shrugged. "I want to." There was nothing wrong with that answer. It still made my stomach tighten. Over the next week, more things didn't fit. She started waking up early, not because she had to. She'd just sit on the balcony with coffee before work, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the parking lot like it had personally offended her. Mara used to hit snooze 3 times and swear at sunlight. Suddenly she was up before dawn on purpose. She stopped telling me the pointless parts of her day. That sounds small, but those pointless parts are what a life is made of. She used to come home and tell me that the girl from accounting kept microwaving fish, or that somebody in her office said, "circle back" 4 times in one meeting. Now if I asked how work was, she'd just say, "Fine," and go rinse her mug. The weirdest part was, she became easier. If I was late, she didn't care. If I forgot to grab groceries, she said, "No problem." If I half listened while she talked, she didn't stop and go, "Are you even hearing me?" She just let it go. I didn't understand then that indifference can look a lot like peace when you really want to believe things are calming down. About 2 weeks after the trip, I made pasta one night and opened a bottle of wine, because I thought maybe we'd fallen into some post-summer slump and just needed a real evening together. We sat at the table, candles lit, dog under Mara's chair waiting for scraps, and I asked, "So what was your favorite part of the wedding?" She twirled noodles around her fork and took too long. "The last night, probably," she said. "What happened?" She smiled without showing teeth. "Nothing dramatic, just stayed up late talking." "With who?" She looked down at her plate. "A bunch of people." I don't know why that answer bothered me so much. Maybe because she was usually specific. Names, impressions, details. Mara loved details. That night, she spoke like someone skimming over thin ice. A few days later, we were on the couch watching some terrible renovation show neither of us actually cared about. Her phone buzzed against the cushion. She picked it up fast, read the screen, and turned it over. I said, "Everything okay?" "Yeah." "Who is it?" She took half a second too long. "Lena." Lena was the bride. I nodded and looked back at the TV, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mara still holding the phone in her lap, thumb resting against the edge like she was trying not to move. That's when I started paying attention in a way I hated. Not snooping, Not checking accounts, just observing. The way you observe a tooth that suddenly feels wrong in your mouth, tongue pressing against it all day. She smiled at her phone differently, not bigger, smaller, closer to herself. She bought a new perfume and said the old one gave her a headache. She started wearing a green blouse I'd always liked, except she never wore it for me. Only on weekdays. One night she was in the shower and her screen lit up on the bathroom counter. I wasn't trying to read it. I really wasn't. But my eyes caught one line before the screen went dark. Still thinking about what you said by the fire pit. No name, just the message. I stood there holding my toothbrush like an idiot, foam drying in my mouth. When she came out, hair wet, cheeks pink from the heat, she saw the look on my face and said, "What?" I could have asked then. I should have asked then. Instead I said, "Nothing." She watched me for a second longer than normal. Okay. That okay stayed with me because it didn't sound relieved. It sounded disappointed. The first real crack came at a dinner with friends. We were at Eric and Jules's place, sitting around their kitchen island eating takeout of cartons, because nobody had energy to plate food. The wedding came up because Jules knew the bride from college too, and she asked Mara if she'd had fun in Santa Fe. Mara said, "Yeah, it was really good to get away." Jules smiled and said, "And you got to reconnect with Ben." That was wild. The room changed in that tiny social way people pretend not to notice. Mara reached for her water too quickly. Ben was just there. Jules blinked. "Oh, sorry. I thought..." "You thought what?" I asked, and I swear I said it lightly. I wanted it to be light. Nobody answered fast enough. Finally Eric coughed and said, "Didn't Mara mention him? He was in their old friend group." Mara looked at me and said, "I told you." She hadn't. Or maybe she had once, years earlier, the way people mention 100 names across 100 stories, and expected that to count. Either way, the name sat in my chest for the rest of dinner like something swallowed wrong. On the drive home I asked, "Who's Ben?" She stared ahead through the windshield for so long I thought maybe she hadn't heard me. Someone I knew in college. Why did Jules make that sound weird? It wasn't weird. Then why won't you look at me? That made her turn. Because I knew you'd do this. Do what? She laughed once, sharp and humorless. Make something out of nothing. That line pissed me off because people only say it when they already know it isn't nothing. We fought that night for the first time in months, and what unsettled me most wasn't what she said. It was how prepared she seemed to say it, that I'd been distant, that I always waited too long to notice when something was wrong, that I liked the version of our marriage that asked the least of me. Some of it was unfair. Some of it landed. At one point I said, "Did you sleep with him?" And she looked at me with this expression I still can't describe, not outrage, not exactly guilt either. More like I'd skipped ahead in a movie she wasn't ready for me to understand yet. "No," she said. I asked, "Why did you have to think about it?" Her voice got very quiet. "Because that's not the only question. I didn't sleep that night." She did eventually, turned away from me, one hand under her cheek, like always. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan and understanding, slowly and unwillingly, that the trip hadn't created something. It had uncovered something. The next week was awful in that restrained adult way that almost feels worse than screaming. We still went to work, still fed the dog, still asked if the other wanted coffee. But everything underneath had shifted. One evening, I came home and found her sitting at the kitchen table with a legal pad in front of her. Not divorce papers, just a page of notes in her handwriting. Things I have not been saying. I didn't even sit down. She looked up and said, "I met Ben for a drink the day after the wedding." There it was. I asked, "Why?" She rubbed at a corner of the paper with her thumb. "Because I wanted to." The honesty of that hit harder than any excuse would have. She told me they'd been close years ago. Bad timing, wrong city. Life moved on. Seeing him again at the wedding had stirred something up, and after everyone else flew home, she changed her flight and stayed one more night. They walked around town. They talked for hours. They kissed outside his hotel. She started crying when she said that part. But even then I could tell she wasn't crying because she kissed him. She was crying because she came home already knowing what it meant. "I thought it would wear off when I got back," she said. "I thought I'd walk in here and feel normal again." I looked around our kitchen, the fruit bowl we never emptied fast enough, the crooked cabinet handle I'd promised to fix, her sweater over the back of the chair. "Did you?" I asked. She shook her head. That was the real betrayal, if I'm honest. Not the kiss. Not the extra night. It was that she returned already, partly gone, and let me keep talking to her like she still lived here fully. I asked if she loved him. She said, "I don't know him well enough for that." I said, "Then what is this?" And she covered her face and said something I think about more than I want to. "It's me realizing how long I've been lonely with you. You can defend yourself against cheating. You can get angry, self-righteous, clean. Loneliness is harder because it drags your own failures into the room. We separated 2 months later, not because of one kiss, though that would have been easier to explain to people. It was because once the truth was said out loud, everything before it rearranged itself. All those quiet mornings on the balcony, the sudden patience, the neat unpacking, the softness that felt like mercy. She hadn't come back renewed. She'd come back decided. I noticed too late because I was waiting for something dramatic. A text on a locked screen. A confession. Lipstick on a collar. Some stupid, obvious thing from a movie. Instead, what I got was a woman who came home from a trip and stopped fighting for the life we were in. That was the sign. Not the lie. Not the man. The absence of effort where love used to live. The last time we spoke about Santa Fe, months after she moved out, I asked her when she knew. She thought about it for a long time. "On the plane home," she said. "I kept thinking I should be relieved to come back, and I wasn't." I didn't answer right away, because that was the part I had noticed in the doorway the first night. In the way she kissed me, in the way she stood there with her suitcase still in her hand, looking past me into the apartment, like she was trying to remember why she belonged in it. I saw it. I just loved her enough to call it jet lag.